Hello, everybody. It's so nice to be here. And Mel, I'm very grateful for that introduction. Something strikes me as we begin this session, which is the word philanthropy actually means the love of mankind. And when we originally planned this session, we had imagined it maybe in a conversation around COVID, but as we acknowledge the reality of the past week's incidences and some of the racism and bias that we've witnessed, I think the opportunity is a bit larger to really talk about philanthropy at any age or philanthropy during a crisis, much like we're experiencing here today. And I think we have the opportunity to reflect as individuals. If we're motivated to take action and if we're inspired, how can we do that together? And so I've the pleasure of being joined by Pamela Norley from Fidelity Charitable. She's the president and really one of the leading advocates for the power of American philanthropy nationally. For those who may not be familiar, Fidelity Charitable is actually the world's largest grant maker. They're even larger than the Gates Foundation, and they've distributed $7.3 billion over the last year, and that's comprised of more than 250,000 individual donors of all income levels. And it's such a pleasure to have you here next to us. And we begin with what I think is maybe one of the most important questions on the table today as we look at philanthropy in this country, as we look at the love of mankind and the opportunity to make a difference. How have you seen the philanthropy landscape change over the past few months, especially in light of COVID, but even in a bigger picture?
Yeah. So thank you so much, Mel. Thank you so much for those inspiring opening remarks. I think it's wonderful to think about all the New Yorkers coming together and celebrating our first responders. This has just been a remarkable time in the world. And Zeev, it's just wonderful to be here and be part of this. So, I can't jump right into the COVID relief we've seen through philanthropy without acknowledging unbelievable injustice and anger and hatred we've seen in the last couple of weeks. And, what I'm hoping is the unbelievable philanthropic response we've seen COVID translate to address the social injustice issues here in the U.S. So this is philanthropy's transformative moment. We've seen the best in philanthropy through these last 3 months in responding to COVID, at least here in the U.S., and we've been remarkably inspired by the level of giving. It's really been a time of reckoning for all institutions, whether it's public sector, private sector, the social sector. But the three things that we're really seeing that we hope will sustain after COVID is people have a sense of urgency to give. There's never been a better time to try to drive change for the world, and nobody feels that they can be complacent or not and sit on the sidelines. The second is we're seeing philanthropists or any givers give in an unrestricted, flexible way, and I'll get back to that in a moment. And then the third thing we're seeing, which is really powerful and I think will hopefully sustain and drive change, is collaboration like we've never seen before. So starting with urgency, people have a sense of criticality of what their neighbors, their state, their communities, the country, the world is experiencing. We've just had unbelievable outpouring of giving. 85% of the grants that have gone out to date have been to organizations that our donors have never supported. So organizations primarily in the social and human services sectors, the United Ways, the Meals on Wheels, the Salvation Army, World Central Kitchen. We've been recommending organizations that are helping people around the world at scale in the local communities, and you've just seen an enormous amount of outpouring above. We had one of our donors who actually in March, at the time that kind of the virus was raging, when we were concerned about PPE for our first responders, was able to work with a nonprofit to get masks in from Taiwan and then distributed them across Mount Sinai Hospital first responders. And that was a model, I think, that was picked up with a lot of people who saw that there were relationships that they had with companies outside of the U.S. and might allow us to accelerate to save to those. The second thing is flexibility. So in these days, many philanthropists or many givers, they want to have the data, they want measures and metrics, they want to understand the outcomes, they may even require the NPO to put together scorecards to ensure that what they're giving to is getting done. That is all thrown to the wind here as people are saying, we trust you, NPO charity, to tell us where the money should go. They're giving in unrestricted ways more than we've ever seen before. And that's a real blessing, I think, for nonprofits. There's an organization that I'm familiar with that does, that feeds and schools children in northern Nairobi. And they pride themselves on teaching their teachers special curriculum that allows these 3,500 students to reach their highest level of potential. A lot of people have invested in this organization and funded them. And when COVID hit in March, the executive director out of Boston, this is flying kites, recognized that with the children out of school and the farm shut down in Kenya, they were not going to be able to have food. So she, just made a complete pivot, reached out to donors who had directed funds to the curriculum, and reached to new donors to say, we really need to get food in this community. And it had outpouring of response on that. So I think we're going to have to realize that nonprofits need more ability to use funds in the way that they seem fit, and I think we're achieving that. In fact, there's a McKinsey article that I just recently read about, should we think about taking away the hurdles of grant making by allowing nonprofits to use kind of a common app for funding, like we have a common app for admission to college. So interesting idea there. And then third is collaboration. I think it was mentioned by Mel that, we've just seen an unbelievable, appalling digital divide, as we have released 50 million students from school. That's all well and good that we were able to flatten the curve quickly to get them out of the school setting, but we recognized very quickly that many did not have access to technology, they did not have access to the internet. And I think between public, private, and the social sector, we've come together to try to make sure that we get laptops in the hands of those who need them, hotspot cards to those, internet. And I think the country has done a great job in accomplishing that. And I think that will go a long way. It's a really important kind of model for how we think about solving the world's biggest problems. And then in California, the Social Innovation Forum or effort put together, an outreach to all the institutions in California when COVID hit, primarily in March, and said there's never been a more important time for partnership. And so organizations have come together to address the vulnerable and the first responders, and the model there in California has translated around the world.
Thanks, Pamela. I really appreciate those points. I think it's fascinating to understand how your donors have been engaged. And it's actually one of the questions that I'd love to follow up with, recognizing that you are the largest grant maker in the country. Can you tell us a little bit more about the profile of your donors and what you're seeing them do with their donor-advised funds, really thinking about this crisis?
Yeah, so Fidelity Charitable has, as you mentioned, about 250,000 Americans who have donor-advised fund accounts with Fidelity. We've been around for 30 years and built a very leading-edge modern platform with a digital experience. It allows people to have an Amazon-like experience when they're doing their giving. You can do it on your app, you can do it on your computer, you can call in. We try to make it omni-channel. But what we have seen is that people with as little as $50 in their account are emptying their account to support their neighbors. We're seeing people with 5,000 to 5 million contribute from their donor advised. A DAF is a tax-efficient model for charitable giving, and it's the fastest growing philanthropy vehicle in the country, largely because it's so easy to use. We put together tools and resources so that people can come together and do their philanthropy together as a family. We have actually a family that we've supported over the last few years in California that does their giving through Fidelity Charitable. They have 5 children. Over the last couple of years, they've developed a mission for their family that aligns with their values and have created ways to give communities that align with their values. I think that's to them. When COVID hit in March, they were mobilized very quickly to be able to get money out the door and have given away almost $500,000 in very short order. The thing that's been remarkable, though, is that we have seen $3 billion go out year to date to 150,000 charities. So people are using these ready, deployable assets that have been set aside irrevocably for charity and giving now to support a response.
I think when we recognize the power of philanthropy, and even again reflecting on this week's news or the entire coronavirus crisis, at least for me, there's a positive sense of optimism, a positive sense of opportunity. Something that excites me is the recognition that individuals with any means have the opportunity, if they see a need, is to make it actionable. And I'm curious, as we think a little bit of that, what do you see as some of the longer term implications as we look at the pandemic, as we look at the lives affected, as we look at the needs that have changed and shifted, and as we look at even some of the equity or inequalities that it's created? How do you see that play out over the long term?
Yeah. I mean, the nonprofit sector, which is made up of 1.7 million nonprofits, by the way, 80% of them only have 3 months of cash flow, according to Candid, one of the research arms for nonprofits. So I think you're going to see enormous amount of consolidation. I think you're going to see complete digitization of service, both for the programs they're delivering and obviously for their volunteerism. It's a troubling time for nonprofits, and we've done a lot of work to try to sustain them. But it's also, I think, necessary for us to acknowledge that, we haven't supported nonprofits in the way that we probably should have. We haven't supported infrastructure. An organization that focuses on building a CRM tool or building leadership training or diversity training for their staff, those are things that don't get funded. And so I think you're going to see a lot more understanding of sustaining nonprofits will require investment by philanthropists into some of those kind of basic things that organizations need to sustain.
An interesting point. Actually, it lends itself to a personal question I wanted to ask you. For you as a leader, for you as an executive, kind of what has your journey been like during this crisis? Kind of how has this impacted you? And even as we think of you working with your team and kind of guiding your team, leadership, I think, has also changed and shifted. And again, even in recognition of the news this week, I think we're all evolving in real time. Kind of how's that played out for you during this crisis?
Yeah, I mean, there's really kind of the four A's of how we've thought about leadership over the last 3 months. So on 4:30 on March 12th, we were given the edict that we were to start working from home the next day immediately. So having to get all of our phone reps, all of our technology teams, all of our program finance clients, everybody into their home, back to their home by the 13th of March was a remarkable accomplishment. We had a couple of weeks confusion, but now we've settled in over the last 3 months. I mean, we're in week 12 of work from home. We don't see, kind of the need to return to the office at any time soon. We've been managing the volumes and work. But, for us, it was agility. We had to kind of understand that we're in a new world. We had to move quickly. We had to make different decisions that we're normally making, and we had to make them quickly and empower others in an agile environment to accomplish what was necessary to get us up and running. The second thing is we had to accept it. I mean, I'm sure all of you have had that moment of this isn't happening, right? This is surreal. I haven't left my home in 5, 6 weeks. And if I do, I'm wearing gloves and carrying sanitizer and wearing a mask. I think we all just as leaders had to say, this is the way it is, and we have to figure out how to work in this environment. The third thing, and this has been kind of a fun thing, certainly with our team and for many of us, is the authenticity. We're in each other's homes every day. We are in, whether you're in your dining room or your study or your bedroom, or somebody I've talked to me was in their car the other day in the closet. You're having to really be authentic in terms of who you are. There's no hiding it. And then the fourth thing, I think, and this has been the hardest one for our team, but we finally have got, you need to drive a level of alignment about prioritization of resources and what you're trying to get done. When you're in the office and you're sitting around a table, you are talking to each other, you may have some conflict, you may have some issues that arise, but after you leave that meeting, you go have a conversation, you talk about it, you talk it through, you maybe continue to dialogue. You don't have that happening when you're in Zoom meetings all day. You just move from one meeting to the next. And so our team has had to work really hard to try to get aligned and reprioritize resources like we've done to make sure that we can be successful in the work from home environment.
Thanks for that. So I think it brings us to our last question. And as I want to maybe reflect on everything that we've said so far, what is a hope that you have for the people listening in, for those that are motivated to take action, for those that want to act on their passions? What would you wish for them? What would you want for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said at the top of the time, that this is a transformative moment for philanthropy, and that people are giving with a sense of urgency, they're giving with flexibility, and they're giving in collaboration. And my hope is that will sustain. People, as in many disasters, people just give in the moment and then they don't think about it again. I'm hopeful that people acknowledge that this is a marathon, not a sprint, and that we need to continue to stay the course. The other thing I hope that people will do is recognize the importance of collaboration. Each of us does not have the individual ability to try to move things forward on our own, to get long-term sustainable results. You know, there's an African proverb that I often cite to my team about, you know, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And so I'm hopeful that some of the learnings from COVID on the philanthropy side translate to the things that we're seeing on the social injustice side, and that we'll be able to bring that new mindset to how we give to support issues there as well.
Thanks, Pam. And I really think that's a great way to conclude this idea of going together. Bringing it back to my first comments at the top, philanthropy is the love of mankind. And what are we able to do as a collective and as individuals? I think that's just such a powerful statement.